Stop being afraid of people, problems, and life. Adapted version, Part 1. Right now, somewhere in the world, someone is lying awake at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, replaying a conversation that happened 6 hours ago. They are rewriting sentences they wish they had said. They are imagining what the other person must be thinking about them. Their heart is beating a little too fast for someone who is just lying in bed. Nothing dangerous is happening. No one is in the room. But fear is sitting right next to them, whispering the same lie it always whispers. You are not enough. You will mess this up. They will see through you. And the worst part is not the fear itself. The worst part is that this person has been listening to that voice for years. They have turned down opportunities because of it. They have stayed quiet in rooms where their voice mattered. They have smiled and nodded when everything inside them was screaming to speak up. They have watched other people take the chances they wanted to take and then told themselves that those people were just braver, just luckier, just built differently. But here is the truth that no one tells you at 3 in the morning. Those people were not fearless. They were terrified. They just decided to move anyway. And that single decision changed everything. If you have ever held yourself back because you were scared of what someone might think, if you have ever avoided a conversation because you did not want to deal with the tension, if you have ever looked at a problem and thought, I will deal with that tomorrow, and then tomorrow turned into next week, next month, next year, then this audiobook was made for you. Not because there is something wrong with you, but because you deserve to hear what fear has been keeping from you. You are far more capable than you believe, and your life is waiting for you on the other side of the things you keep avoiding. This is not going to be one of those books that tells you to just believe in yourself and everything will magically fall into place. Life does not work that way, and you already know that. What this book will give you is something much more useful, a practical, honest, and deeply human way to stop letting fear run the show. You will learn how to face the things that scare you, how to deal with people who make you feel small, how to stop running from problems, how to quiet the noise of worry, and how to start trusting yourself even when nobody around you understands what you are doing. So stay with me, listen carefully, and let these words become the conversation you have needed to have with yourself for a long time. Chapter 1. Meet your fear before it makes your decisions. Let me ask you something honest. When was the last time you avoided doing something not because it was genuinely dangerous, but simply because it made you uncomfortable? Maybe it was a phone call you kept pushing to tomorrow. Maybe it was a conversation with someone you care about that you have been rehearsing in your head for weeks, but never actually having. Maybe it was raising your hand in a meeting. Maybe it was saying no to someone who always expects you to say yes. Think about that moment. Now ask yourself this. What actually would have happened if you had done it? Not the disaster your brain created, not the worst-case movie your imagination directed, produced, and starred you in. What would have realistically happened? Probably something awkward, maybe something uncomfortable, possibly something that stung for a few hours, but not the catastrophe your mind promised you. And that right there is the first thing you need to understand about fear. Most of the time, it is not protecting you from danger. It is protecting you from discomfort. And those are two very, very different things. Real danger is a car running a red light while you are crossing the street. Real danger is a medical emergency. Real danger is a situation where your physical safety is genuinely at risk. Your body has an incredible system for handling those moments. Your heart rate spikes, adrenaline floods your muscles, your reflexes sharpen. That kind of fear saves lives, and you should be grateful for it. But the fear that keeps you from speaking up in a meeting, the fear that stops you from applying for a better position, the fear that makes you rehearse a simple text message 14 times before sending it, that fear is not saving your life. It is shrinking it, slowly, quietly, one avoided moment at a time. And here is what makes it so tricky. Avoidance feels like relief. You skip the presentation and your shoulders relax. You do not make the call and your stomach unclenches. You stay quiet during the argument and the tension in the room does not land on you. Your brain registers that as a win. It thinks, we avoided the threat and survived. Good job. Let us do that again next time. But the threat was never real. You just trained your brain to believe that ordinary life is something you need to hide from. And every time you avoid, the hiding place gets a little smaller. So what do you do instead? You do not need to fight every fear all at once. That is not realistic, and honestly, it is not even necessary. What you need to do is start questioning the fear instead of automatically obeying it. Here is a simple method that can genuinely change how you operate. The next time you feel that familiar pull to avoid something, stop for 30 seconds and ask yourself 3 questions. First, what exactly am I afraid will happen? Not the vague cloud of dread. The specific thing. Write it down if you can. I am afraid my boss will think my idea is stupid. I am afraid my friend will get angry if I say no. I am afraid I will stumble over my words and people will notice. Get specific, because vague fear is almost impossible to work with, but specific fear can actually be examined. Second, what is the actual evidence that this will happen? Not feelings, not assumptions. Evidence. Has your boss called your ideas stupid before? Has your friend ended friendships over a single disagreement? Have people actually mocked you for stumbling over a word? When you look at the evidence honestly, you will often find that your fear is running on predictions, not facts. Third, what happens if I do this thing and the uncomfortable result actually occurs? This is the question most people skip, and it is the most important one. Because even if the awkward thing happens, even if your voice shakes, even if someone disagrees, even if it does not go perfectly, can you survive that? Of course you can. You have already survived 100 uncomfortable moments in your life. You just forgot about them because they were not nearly as devastating as your brain promised they would be. This is not about becoming some superhuman who never feels nervous. Nervousness is a normal part of being alive. Your hands might shake before a big conversation. Your voice might crack when you say something vulnerable. Your palms might sweat before you walk into a room full of strangers. All of that is fine. The question is not whether you feel nervous. The question is whether nervousness gets to make your decisions for you. There is a huge difference between feeling afraid and living afraid. Feeling afraid is a temporary physical response. Living afraid is a long-term pattern where you consistently choose the safe option over the meaningful one. And most people do not even realize they have crossed that line until they look back and wonder where the years went. So, here is your first assignment from this book. Today, before this day ends, do one thing you have been avoiding because of mild discomfort, not the biggest fear on your list. Start with something manageable. Send the message. Make the call. Share the opinion. Ask the question you have been swallowing. Set the boundary you have been tiptoeing around. Do it imperfectly. Do it nervously. Do it with your heart pounding and your inner voice screaming that this is a terrible idea. And then notice what happens afterward. Notice that you survived. Notice that the world did not collapse. Notice that the discomfort faded faster than you expected. That is evidence. Real, personal, undeniable evidence that you can do hard things. And that evidence is worth more than any motivational quote you will ever read. One more thing before we move on. Fear loves to take you into the future. It pulls you out of this moment and drops you into a conversation that has not happened, a rejection that nobody has given you, a failure that does not exist yet. Your body does not know the difference. It reacts to imagined pain the same way it reacts to real pain. Your muscles tighten, your breathing gets shallow, your chest feels heavy, and suddenly you are exhausted from something that never actually occurred. When that happens, bring yourself back. Feel your feet on the ground. Look around the room and name 3 things you can see. Listen to whatever sound is closest to you. Take 1 slow breath. Then ask yourself the simplest, most powerful question you can ask during fear. What needs to happen right now? Not next month. Not in the worst-case scenario your brain is building like a horror movie. Right now. That one question can shrink an overwhelming mountain of anxiety into a single manageable step. And a single manageable step is all you ever need to begin. You are not broken for feeling afraid. You are human. But being human also means you get to choose what you do with the fear. You can let it sit in the passenger seat. Just stop letting it drive. Chapter 2. Stop shrinking around other people. Let me paint a picture for you. You walk into a room. There is someone there who just radiates confidence. Maybe it is their posture. Maybe it is the way they speak, loud and certain, like every word they say is a fact written in stone. Maybe it is their title, their clothes, their reputation. And something happens inside you before a single word is exchanged. You become smaller. Your voice drops half a volume. Your opinions suddenly feel less important. You start second-guessing the sentence you were about to say. You smile a little too much. You agree a little too quickly. You leave the conversation 20 minutes later and spend the next 2 hours remembering all the things you should have said. Sound familiar? You are not alone. Most people have experienced this, and the reason it happens is not because the other person is actually more valuable than you. It is because somewhere along the way, you started measuring your worth through other people's confidence. Their loud voice made your quiet voice feel wrong. Their certainty made your uncertainty feel like weakness. Their presence made you forget your own. But here's something important that nobody teaches you in school. Confidence is not the same thing as correctness. Someone can deliver a terrible idea with absolute certainty and make it sound brilliant. Someone else can have the best idea in the room and bury it under apologies and qualifiers. The volume of a person's voice has nothing to do with the value of what they are saying. Read that again. The volume of a person's voice has nothing to do with the value of what they are saying. So why do we shrink? Part of it is biological. Human beings are social animals. For thousands of years, being rejected by the group could literally mean death. So our brains evolved to be extremely sensitive to social hierarchy. When someone seems powerful, your brain sends out little warning signals. Be careful. Do not upset them. Stay small. Stay safe. That system kept your ancestors alive in the wild, but you are not in the wild anymore. You are in a meeting room or a family dinner or a text conversation. The stakes are not survival. The stakes are temporary discomfort, and you already know you can handle that. The next thing to understand is that most intimidating people are not trying to intimidate you. They are just being themselves. Their confidence may come from years of experience or natural personality, or honestly, from their own insecurities dressed up in a loud voice. You have no idea what is going on inside another person. Someone who seems invincible at work might go home and feel completely lost. Someone who speaks with authority in public might lie awake at night full of doubt. You are comparing your internal experience with their external performance, and that comparison will always be unfair. So how do you stop shrinking? First, prepare your message before you enter the room. When pressure hits, your brain tends to go blank. That is not a sign of stupidity. That is a sign of stress. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that handles clear thinking, can slow down when you feel socially threatened. So give yourself a head start. Before an important conversation, write down 2 or 3 things you need to say. Keep them short. Keep them clear. This way, when the pressure arrives, you have something solid to hold on to instead of searching for words while your heart races. Second, slow down your responses. Intimidating people often create urgency. They speak fast. They demand quick answers. They react strongly. And if you try to match their speed, you will often end up saying things you did not mean or agreeing to things you did not want. You do not have to match anyone's tempo. Take a breath. Pause for a moment. Then respond to the actual point, not the pressure. A calm pause is one of the most powerful tools in any conversation. It tells the other person, and more importantly tells yourself, that you are choosing your words rather than being pushed into them. Third, learn to disagree without apologizing for existing. You can say, "I see it differently." You can say, "I need to think about that before I decide." You can say, "I understand your point, but I have a different perspective." These sentences are not aggressive. They are not rude. They are simply honest. And the first time you use one in a conversation that used to make you shrink, you will feel something shift inside you. Not confidence exactly. Something quieter than that. Self-respect. Here is another thing that will change your life. Stop confusing kindness with submission. Being a kind person does not mean agreeing with everything. Being a good listener does not mean never sharing your own view. Being respectful does not mean letting someone walk over you and then thanking them for the footprints. You can listen deeply and still disagree. You can care about someone's feelings and still say no. You can be gentle and still have a backbone. Those are not contradictions. They are the marks of a genuinely strong person. Think about the people in your life who make you feel small. Now ask yourself this honestly. Is it their behavior that creates the problem, or is it your response to their behavior? Because here is the uncomfortable truth. You cannot control how someone else shows up. You cannot make a loud person quiet or a demanding person patient. But you absolutely can change how you respond. You can stop over-explaining yourself. You can stop seeking approval before expressing your opinion. You can stop apologizing for having needs. You can stop treating another person's disappointment as proof that you did something wrong. And here is what will surprise you. When you stop shrinking, many of the people who intimidated you will actually respect you more, not because you became aggressive, but because you became real. People trust consistency. They trust someone who can hold their position without being nasty about it. They trust someone who listens carefully, but does not surrender their judgment just to avoid tension. Your challenge from this chapter is simple but important. The next time you are in a conversation with someone who usually makes you feel smaller, change one behavior. Just one. Speak at your normal volume instead of dropping it. Finish your sentence instead of trailing off. Ask for clarification instead of pretending to understand. Say what you actually think instead of what you think they want to hear. You do not need to revolutionize the entire relationship in one afternoon. You just need to prove to yourself that you can exist at your full size in someone else's presence. Because once you prove that once, you will start proving it again and again. And slowly, the version of you that shrinks will be replaced by the version of you that stays. There is one more thing I want you to remember from this chapter. The goal is never to dominate people. It is never about proving you are better or louder or tougher. The goal is simply to stop handing your self-worth to every confident person who walks into the room. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to have opinions that differ from the majority. You are allowed to ask questions, set limits, and say things that other people might not love hearing. You do not need to become a different person. You just need to stop hiding the person you already are. The strongest form of confidence is not the loudest voice in the room. It is the person who can sit in disagreement without panicking, who can listen without losing themselves, who can respect someone else's experience without erasing their own. That person has always been inside you. You have just been keeping them too quiet. It is time to let them speak. Part 2, Chapter 3. Say what you mean without drowning. In guilt, I want you to think about the last time you swallowed your words, not because the timing was wrong, not because the setting was inappropriate, but because you were scared of how someone would react. Maybe you sat across from a friend who said something that bothered you, and instead of being honest, you laughed. Maybe your partner made a decision you disagreed with, and instead of sharing your perspective, you nodded along and quietly resented them for the rest of the evening. Maybe someone at work took credit for something you contributed to, and instead of speaking up, you told yourself it was not a big deal. But it was a big deal. It was a big deal to you. And the fact that you keep telling yourself it was not is part of the problem. Here's what happens when you consistently silence yourself. A gap opens up between who you are and who you pretend to be. At first, the gap is small. One swallowed sentence here, one fake smile there, one agreement you did not actually mean. But over time, that gap becomes a canyon, and you end up living on the wrong side of it, performing a version of yourself that keeps everyone comfortable except you. Honest communication is not about becoming blunt or aggressive. It is not about saying whatever crosses your mind without caring who it hits. That is not honesty. That is carelessness wearing an honesty costume. Real honesty takes more effort than that. It requires you to think about what you actually feel. Find the words to express it clearly. Choose a time and tone that respects the other person, and then say it anyway, even when your stomach is doing backflips. Let me give you a practical starting point. For the next 7 days, keep a small record. Every time you hold something back, out of fear, not out of wisdom, but out of fear, write it down. What did you want to say? Who were you with? What were you afraid would happen? You do not need to show this to anyone. This is just for you. At the end of the week, look at the patterns. You might discover something interesting. Maybe you are not afraid of honesty in general. Maybe you are afraid of honesty with one specific person. Maybe you are not afraid of judgment from strangers. Maybe you are terrified of disappointing your mother or your boss or your best friend. That specificity matters enormously because you cannot fix a problem you have not properly identified. Now here is a skill that will save you in almost every difficult conversation. Separate the behavior from the person. There is a massive difference between telling someone, "You interrupted me 3 times during that meeting," and telling someone, "You are so disrespectful and you never listen to anyone." The first sentence describes something that actually happened. The second sentence attacks who they are. The first invites a conversation. The second starts a war. When you focus on what happened rather than who someone is, you remove a huge amount of the emotional charge from the conversation. The other person is far less likely to become defensive because you are not threatening their identity. You are just pointing out a specific thing that needs to change. Try it. The next time someone does something that bothers you, describe the action, explain how it affected you, and say what you need going forward. That is it. 3 steps. You do not need a TED Talk. You do not need a therapy degree. You just need to be specific and respectful. But I know what you might be thinking. What if I say something honest and the other person does not like it? What if they get angry? What if they pull away? What if the relationship changes? Here is the honest answer. It might. And I am not going to pretend that is easy. But think about what the alternative looks like. You keep pretending. You keep swallowing. You keep smiling when you are hurting. And the relationship stays the same on the surface while slowly rotting underneath. Is that actually better? A relationship that can only survive on your silence is not a relationship that is protecting you. It is a relationship that is consuming you. Healthy relationships are not the ones where nobody ever disagrees. They are the ones where people can disagree, feel uncomfortable for a little while, and then come back to each other with more understanding than before. Disagreement is not the enemy of connection. Dishonesty is. There is another habit I want you to break, and it is one almost everyone does without realizing it. Stop overqualifying your own opinions. Listen to how many people speak when they actually have something important to say. They start with, "I am sorry, this might be a dumb question," or "I do not know if this makes sense, but maybe, I guess, possibly, I am not sure." By the time they finish apologizing for having a thought, the thought itself has lost all its power. You can be humble without erasing yourself. Saying, "I see it differently," is both honest and respectful. Saying, "I am probably totally wrong, and this is probably stupid, but maybe I kind of think that perhaps things might be slightly different," is self-sabotage disguised as politeness. Here is something else most people get wrong about honest communication. They think it is only about hard conversations. It is not. Honest communication also means telling someone when they did something good. It means saying thank you and meaning it. It means telling your friend that their support actually made a difference during a rough week. It means looking at someone and saying, "I appreciate you," without waiting for a birthday card to give you permission. The world is full of people who are starving for one honest word of encouragement. Be the person who gives it. That is honest communication too. And one final thought on this. Speaking your truth is a skill, and like every skill, you will not be perfect at it from the start. You will say something awkwardly. You will get the timing wrong. You will occasionally say more than you needed to. That does not mean you should stop trying. It means you are learning. The only people who never stumble over their words are the ones who never say anything worth stumbling over. Go speak. Imperfectly, nervously, honestly. Your voice matters more than your comfort. And before we leave this chapter, I want to talk about the other side of honest communication. Receiving it. Because it is one thing to speak your truth. It is another thing entirely to hear someone else's truth about you without falling apart. When someone gives you feedback, your first instinct might be to defend yourself. Your brain hears criticism and immediately starts building walls. But wait, before you start constructing your defense, just listen. Let them finish. Do not interrupt. Do not mentally rehearse your counter-argument while they are still talking. Just hear the actual words they are saying. Then ask yourself one question. Is there something useful in this? Not whether it felt good, not whether they said it perfectly, not whether you agree with every syllable, just, is there something useful here that could make me better? Sometimes the answer is yes. Someone points out a blind spot you genuinely did not see. That is a gift, even if it comes in rough packaging. Sometimes the answer is no. Someone projects their frustration onto you, and the criticism says more about their mood than your behavior. Either way, you examined it. You did not just react. You responded. That is emotional maturity, and it will serve you in every relationship you ever have. There is also an important difference between criticism and rejection. Someone can disagree with what you did without rejecting who you are. Your manager can point out errors in your report without saying you are incompetent. Your friend can dislike your decision without ending the friendship. If you start treating every piece of critical feedback as a personal attack, you will spend your entire life on the defensive. And defensive people do not grow. They just get exhausted. Chapter 4. Walk toward your problems, not away from them. I need to tell you something you probably already know, but keep pretending you do not. That thing you have been avoiding, it is not going away. It is sitting in the corner of your mind like an uninvited guest at a dinner party, getting louder the longer you ignore it. The bill you did not open, the conversation you did not have, the decision you keep pushing to next Monday, the health appointment you rescheduled for the 4th time, the email sitting in your drafts folder half written, because finishing it means you actually have to deal with the response. Every single one of those things is costing you something right now. Not tomorrow, not eventually. Right now. Because even when you are not actively dealing with a problem, your brain knows it is there. It keeps a tab running in the background, quietly draining your energy, your focus, and your peace of mind. You have probably experienced this. You are watching a movie or having dinner with someone, and suddenly your chest tightens for no obvious reason. Your brain just reminded you that the thing is still there, waiting, growing, getting more expensive the longer you leave it alone. Here is the secret that productive people understand. Problems do not shrink with time. They compound. A small misunderstanding you could have cleared up with one conversation last month has now become a full relationship rift. A financial issue you could have fixed with one phone call 3 months ago now requires a restructuring plan. A work task that would have taken 2 hours in week 1 is now a week-long emergency in week 12. Avoidance has a price, and the interest rate is brutal. So why do we avoid? Because facing a problem means feeling something uncomfortable. It means admitting something is wrong. It means sitting in uncertainty. It means potentially discovering that you contributed to the mess. It means giving up the fantasy that the problem will somehow solve itself while you watch another episode, scroll another feed, sleep another night. But here is a question that changed the way I think about problems. Instead of asking, how do I make this problem go away? Start asking, what is the smallest thing I can do about this today? That shift is everything. Because the reason most problems feel overwhelming is that we look at the entire mountain instead of the next step. You do not need to solve your entire financial situation tonight. You need to open the account and look at the numbers. You do not need to repair a broken relationship in one conversation. You need to send the first message. You do not need to overhaul your entire health in a week. You need to prepare one better meal or take one walk. The smallest step breaks the spell of avoidance. Once you take it, you are no longer someone who is ignoring the problem. You are someone who is working on it. That shift in identity matters more than you think. Here's another trap that keeps smart people stuck for months: waiting for the perfect solution. You analyze every angle. You research every option. You weigh every possible outcome. And 3 months later, you are still analyzing while the problem has doubled in size. A good enough solution today will almost always beat a perfect solution that never arrives. You do not need the ideal budget plan. You need to cut 3 unnecessary expenses this week. You do not need the perfect words for a difficult conversation. You need to start talking and figure it out together. Progress is messy, and that is completely fine. Done beats perfect every single time. Now let me give you a framework that can help you handle almost any problem without spiraling into overwhelm. Divide the situation into 3 categories. First, what can you directly control? Your behavior, your effort, your communication, your preparation, your response. Second, what can you influence but not fully control? Other people's cooperation, timing, certain outcomes. Third, what is completely outside your control? Other people's feelings, the economy, the past, random events. Spend 80% of your energy on the first category. Spend the remaining energy wisely on the second. And let go of the third. Completely. Obsessing over things you cannot control is like screaming at the weather. It might make you feel like you are doing something, but the rain does not care. I want to address another pattern that keeps people stuck: the myth of readiness. I will deal with it when I feel ready. I will have the conversation when I am in the right headspace. I will start when the timing is better. Here is the problem with waiting for readiness. It almost never shows up on its own. Readiness is not something that falls from the sky one Tuesday morning. Readiness usually develops after you start, not before. You become ready for difficult conversations by having difficult conversations. You become ready for hard decisions by making hard decisions. The competence comes from the doing, not from the waiting. And here's something practical you can do tonight. Pick one problem you have been dodging, just one. Write it down in one clear sentence. Not everything is a disaster, and my life is falling apart. Something specific. I have not responded to my landlord about the lease renewal. My project is 2 weeks behind schedule, and I have not told anyone. I owe my friend an honest conversation about what happened last month. Then write the next single action. Not the full solution, the next step. Send the email, make the call, open the document, schedule the appointment. That is it. You do not need a master plan tonight. You need momentum. There is something else I want to share with you about problem solving, and it is something nobody talks about enough. You are allowed to ask for help. Somewhere along the way, many of us picked up the idea that handling things alone is a sign of strength. It is not. It is often a sign of pride dressed up as independence. A mechanic can spot in 5 minutes what you have been struggling with for 3 weeks. An accountant can untangle in one afternoon what has been keeping you up at night for months. A friend with more experience can offer a perspective that saves you from a mistake you cannot see coming. Asking for help is not admitting defeat. It is using every available resource to solve a problem effectively. That is actually the smarter, stronger approach. Here is a truth that might sting a little. The things you are avoiding right now are not going to get easier with time. That email will not write itself. That conversation will not resolve through telepathy. That bill will not shrink because you stopped looking at it. The only thing that changes with avoidance is the cost, and it always goes up, never down. So stop negotiating with delay. Start negotiating with the problem itself. And finally, develop a habit of weekly check-ins with yourself. Once a week, sit down for 15 minutes and review 5 areas: your finances, your work, your relationships, your health, your personal growth. Ask 3 questions about each one. What is going well? What is getting worse? What needs my attention before it becomes urgent? This turns problem solving from a crisis response into a maintenance routine. You stop waiting for the smoke alarm to go off and start checking the batteries instead. It is not glamorous. It is not dramatic. But it is the habit that separates people who are constantly overwhelmed from people who seem to handle life with steady confidence. Your problems are not going to disappear because you wished hard enough. They are going to get smaller because you faced them directly, broke them into pieces, and handled them one responsible action at a time. Stop running. Turn around. Look the problem in the eye. It is almost never as big as it looked from a distance. One more thing that deserves your attention. Communication is part of problem solving. Most people treat silence as a strategy when things go wrong. They miss a deadline and go quiet. They cannot pay a bill and avoid the phone call. They make a mistake at work and hope nobody notices. But silence almost always makes things worse. People cannot respond to information they do not have. A landlord who hears from you early has options. A landlord who hears nothing assumes the worst. A manager who gets an honest update can help you reprioritize. A manager who discovers a hidden problem feels blindsided and loses trust. Get comfortable delivering imperfect news early. It is not fun, it is not comfortable, but it is almost always better than the alternative, which is letting the situation grow in the dark until it explodes in the light. And remember this, you are not measured by how many problems show up in your life. Every single person on this planet is carrying something. You are measured by how honestly and consistently you respond to what lands in front of you. Stop waiting for a problem-free life. It does not exist. Start becoming the kind of person who handles problems with clarity, responsibility, and enough self-respect to ask for help when they need it. That version of you is not far away. It is one decision, one phone call, one honest conversation closer than you think. Part 3. Chapter 5. Stop renting out your mind to worry. Here's something nobody warns you about. You can be sitting in a perfectly safe room, with food in your fridge, a roof over your head, people who care about you, and still feel like everything is falling apart. Not because anything is actually falling apart, but because your mind decided to fast forward into next week, next month, next year, and build a disaster movie out of things that have not happened yet. You are watching your future self lose the job. You are watching your future self get rejected. You are watching your future self run out of money, fail the exam, ruin the relationship, embarrass themselves in front of everyone. And your body does not know this is fiction. Your palms sweat. Your chest tightens. Your jaw clenches. Your sleep disappears. You are physically exhausted by Tuesday from events scheduled for a Thursday that may never actually arrive. That is worry. And if nobody has told you this clearly enough, let me say it now. Worry is not the same thing as caring, and it is definitely not the same thing as planning. Planning looks like this. I have a big presentation on Friday. Let me outline my key points, rehearse them twice, prepare for likely questions, and get a good night of sleep on Thursday. That is productive. That creates something useful. Worry looks like this. I have a big presentation on Friday. What if I forget everything? What if they ask something I cannot answer? What if my voice shakes? What if they think I am incompetent? What if this ruins my reputation? What if I get fired? What if I cannot pay rent? What if I end up alone? You started with a presentation and ended up homeless in 12 seconds. That is not planning. That is your imagination torturing you with a story it made up. The difference between planning and worry is simple. Planning ends with a decision or an action. Worry ends with the same thought it started with, except now you are more tired and more afraid. If you have been thinking about the same problem for 3 hours and you still have not identified a single concrete step, you are not problem solving. You are just suffering with extra steps. So how do you break the cycle? Start by catching yourself in the act. Pay attention to the language inside your head. When you hear the words, "what if?" that is usually worry talking. What if they say no? What if it does not work out? What if I am not good enough? These are not questions your brain actually wants answered. They are anxiety wearing a question mark as a disguise. When you catch a what if, replace it with a what is. What is actually happening right now? What is the real information I have? What is one thing I can do about this today? This pulls you out of the imaginary future and back into the present moment, where you actually have some power. Here is another habit that feeds worry, without you realizing it. Constant information consumption. You scroll through news, social media, messages, updates, opinions, arguments, and predictions nonstop. Your brain never gets a moment of quiet. And when you finally put the phone down, your mind does not know how to stop. It keeps scanning for threats, looking for problems, generating scenarios, because that is what you have trained it to do all day. Try an experiment this week. Choose 1 hour each day where you consume zero information. No phone, no news, no podcasts, no scrolling, just you and whatever is physically around you. Eat a meal and actually taste it. Walk somewhere and actually notice the street. Sit quietly and let your thoughts slow down without chasing them, you might be surprised at how much lighter your brain feels when you stop feeding it problems it cannot solve. Another thing that keeps people trapped in worry is the belief that worrying proves you care. You might think that if you stop worrying about your children, you are a bad parent. If you stop worrying about money, you are being irresponsible. If you stop worrying about work, you do not take your career seriously. But that is a lie. Worry tells you to keep its job. Caring means doing what you reasonably can and then allowing yourself to live. A good parent prepares their child, teaches them, supports them, and then trusts the process. A responsible person manages their money, creates a reasonable plan, and then stops recalculating the same numbers at midnight. Caring is action. Worry is repetition without progress. Let me give you one of the most powerful anti-worry tools I know. It is embarrassingly simple, but it works. Tonight, before you go to sleep, write down every unfinished concern on a piece of paper. Next to each one, write the single next action. Not the full solution, just the next step. Then close the notebook and put it somewhere you will see it tomorrow morning. What you have just done is told your brain, I hear you. I have recorded the problem. I have identified what to do next. You can stop reminding me now. Your brain holds on to worry partly because it is afraid you will forget. When you write it down, you give it permission to let go. It does not always work perfectly, but over time, it teaches your mind that nighttime is for rest, not rehearsal. You should also stop using your bed as a thinking desk. Your bedroom should be the one place where your mind knows it is allowed to stop working. If a worry pops up after you lie down, do not start building a whole strategy around it. Acknowledge it. Say to yourself, yes, that is a real concern, and I will deal with it tomorrow because I already wrote it down. Then bring your attention back to something physical. The weight of the blanket, the rhythm of your breathing, the quiet hum of the room. You are not forcing the thought away. You are simply refusing to give it a meeting room at midnight. There is one more pattern I want to name: confusing possibility with probability. Your mind says, I could lose my job. And technically, yes, that is possible. It is also possible that a satellite falls on your house tomorrow. But you are not lying awake about satellites. The reason the job worry sticks is because your brain treats it as likely rather than merely possible. Challenge that. Ask yourself honestly, how many times has this actually happened? What is the realistic probability? And even if it did happen, what would I actually do? That last question is the secret weapon. Because most of the time, you would figure it out. You would make calls. You would adjust. You would find another way. You have done it before. You just forgot because worry erased the memory of your own resilience. You are tougher than your anxiety gives you credit for. Stop letting worry use your imagination against you. Take back the remote control. Decide what deserves your mental energy and what is just noise pretending to be urgent. Your attention is one of the most valuable things you own. Stop giving it away to problems that do not exist yet. There is something else that fuels worry that most people never think about. Unfinished decisions. You know the ones. Should I accept that offer? Should I change my routine? Should I have that conversation? Should I start that project? Every time the question comes back, you reconsider the same information, go back and forth, and end the session exactly where you started. No decision, just fatigue. Give your decisions a deadline. Write down what you know. Write down what you do not know. Identify the risks on both sides, because doing nothing has risks too. Then pick a date by which you will decide. When that date arrives, choose. And once you choose, stop reopening the case without new evidence. Changing your mind because new facts appeared is wisdom. Reconsidering every night because the uncertainty makes you uncomfortable is just worry pretending to be diligence. Pay attention to how you talk about your future. The words you use shape how your brain processes uncertainty. Saying everything is going to fall apart creates panic. Saying, I do not know exactly what will happen, but I will deal with whatever comes, is not blind optimism. It is a more accurate statement about how life actually works. You have been dealing with unexpected situations your entire life. You are still here. That track record matters more than the fear in your chest right now. Your mind deserves rest. Not because the world is perfect, but because you cannot solve tomorrow's problems with tonight's exhaustion. Let worry visit if it must, but stop offering it a permanent room in your head. You have better things to do with that space. Chapter 6. Hold your ground without losing your cool. Let me ask you a question. When was the last time someone disagreed with you and you immediately backed down? Not because they had a better argument, not because new information changed your mind, but because the tension of disagreement was so uncomfortable that surrendering felt easier than standing? If you are being honest, it has probably happened more than once. And every time it does, something small inside you breaks. Not dramatically, not loudly, just a quiet crack. Because you know you did not change your mind, you just changed your words. And now you are carrying an opinion you do not believe in, smiling at a decision you do not support, going along with a direction you know is wrong, all because standing your ground felt scarier than losing it. Here is what I need you to understand. Standing firm is not about being stubborn. Stubborn people refuse to change even when the evidence is staring them in the face. Standing firm means knowing what you believe, understanding why you believe it, and being willing to hold that position until someone gives you a genuinely better reason to change it. Not a louder voice, not social pressure, not guilt, a better reason. The first thing you need to do is separate disagreement from danger. Your brain does not always know the difference. When someone challenges your idea, your nervous system can react as if someone challenged your survival. Your heart speeds up, your face gets warm, your thoughts scramble, you feel the urge to either attack or retreat. But nobody is actually threatening you. Someone just has a different opinion. Learning to stay calm during that biological storm is one of the most valuable skills you will ever develop. Here is a practical way to do it. When someone challenges you and you feel that heat rising, do not respond immediately. Take one breath. Not a dramatic, visible, look at me being calm breath. Just a quiet pause. Then ask one question before you give your answer. What specifically do you disagree with? Or can you give me an example? These questions do two things. They buy you time to think clearly, and they force the conversation to become specific rather than emotional. Vague accusations are almost impossible to address. Specific concerns can actually be discussed. And here is a small but important detail. Use specific language when you disagree. Words like always and never are almost guaranteed to escalate any conversation. You never. Listen to me is not a statement anyone can work with. It is a grenade. But I felt unheard during our conversation yesterday about the budget is something you can actually talk about. Specific language makes disagreement productive. Vague language makes it explosive. Choose your words like they matter, because in these moments, they absolutely do. Now, here is something that will change the way you handle every argument you ever have. Stop listening to respond and start listening to understand. Most people in a disagreement are not really listening to the other person. They are waiting. They are scanning for the moment the other person takes a breath so they can jump in with their counterpoint. They hear half a sentence and start building their defense. And the other person can feel it. They know you are not really hearing them. So they repeat themselves louder, and you defend yourself harder. And the conversation becomes a contest that nobody wins. Try this instead. Let the person finish their entire point. Then repeat it back in your own words. Say something like, "So what you are saying is that you think we should take a different approach because of these specific concerns. Is that right?" You are not agreeing with them. You are showing them that you actually heard what they said. And something almost magical happens when people feel heard. They calm down. The volume drops. The aggression softens. Because most of the time, people get louder not because they are angry, but because they do not feel listened to. Once you have genuinely understood their position, then share yours. Calmly, clearly, without apologizing for having it. Say, "I understand your concern, and here is why I see it differently." Give your reason. One clear reason is more powerful than 5 scattered ones. Do not over-explain. Do not keep adding justifications because the other person has not nodded yet. Say what you mean, give the reason, and then stop talking. Silence after a clear statement is not awkward. It is powerful. Now I want to address something that trips a lot of people up. What do you do when someone uses pressure tactics instead of actual arguments? You know the moves. Everyone else agrees with me. You are the only one making this difficult. You are being too sensitive. If you really cared, you would just go along with it. These are not arguments. They are manipulation dressed in conversational clothing. And you do not owe them a response on their terms. When someone uses group pressure, ask for the actual reasoning behind the group's position. When someone tells you that you are too sensitive, ask them to explain the specific issue without the label. When someone implies that disagreeing means you do not care, recognize that for what it is, an emotional shortcut designed to skip past the real conversation. You can say, "I care about this situation, which is exactly why I want to make sure we get it right," rather than just agree quickly. That sentence is firm, respectful, and nearly impossible to argue against. There is another side to standing firm that people often overlook. Knowing when to change your mind. Because real strength is not about winning every disagreement. Real strength is being open enough to say, "Actually, you made a good point. I had not considered that. Let me rethink this." That sentence does not make you weak. It makes you intellectually honest. And people will trust you more for it, not less. Because they will know that when you do hold your position, you are holding it for a real reason, not just ego. Here is your challenge from this chapter. The next time you find yourself in a disagreement, resist 2 urges. The urge to immediately surrender just to end the discomfort, and the urge to immediately attack just to protect your ego. Instead, sit in the middle. Listen fully. Understand the other person's point. State your own position clearly. Give your reason. Then let the conversation happen without needing to control the outcome. You might discover something powerful. You can disagree with someone and still respect them. You can hold your ground and still keep the relationship. You can change your mind without losing your identity. And you can walk away from a conversation knowing that you were honest, fair, and steady, even when the pressure was high. That is not stubbornness. That is not aggression. That is character. And it is built one difficult conversation at a time. Let me leave you with one more thought on this. What you do after the disagreement matters just as much as what you do during it. If you told someone you would review the evidence, review it. If you said you would follow up, follow up. If you committed to a change, make the change. People stop taking your words seriously when your actions do not match. But when you consistently follow through on what you say during hard conversations, people learn something important about you. They learn that your word has weight. And that kind of trust is not built through grand gestures. It is built through small, consistent, boring reliability. Your tone during disagreement is also worth paying attention to. Speaking too fast makes you sound anxious. Speaking too loud turns a discussion into a competition. Sarcasm might feel satisfying in the moment, but it almost always creates resentment that outlasts the conversation. Simple, calm, clear language wins, not because it is more impressive, but because it keeps the door open for actual resolution. And resolution is the point. Not victory, not dominance. Resolution. You will not get this right every time. Some conversations will go sideways no matter how well you prepare. You will lose your cool occasionally. You will say something you regret. You will walk away wishing you had handled it differently. That is fine. That is human. The goal is not perfection. The goal is progress. And progress means that the version of you sitting in tomorrow's disagreement handles it slightly better than the version of you sitting in yesterday's. Keep practicing, keep showing up, keep holding your ground when your reasons are sound, and keep changing your mind when the evidence calls for it. That balance is not easy, but it is the foundation of a person other people can genuinely respect and trust. Part 4, Chapter 7. Trust yourself, even when nobody gets it. There is a particular kind of loneliness that nobody really talks about. It is not the loneliness of being alone in a room. It is the loneliness of being surrounded by people who do not understand why you are doing what you are doing. You are making a decision that feels right in your bones, but every person you explain it to looks at you like you just spoke a different language. Your family thinks you're being reckless. Your friends think you're overthinking it. Your coworkers think you're making a mistake. And suddenly, the clearest decision you have made in months starts to feel like the dumbest one. That is the moment where most people fold. They put the dream back in the drawer. They cancel the application. They stay in the job, the city, the relationship, the routine that stopped fitting a long time ago. Not because they changed their mind, but because the weight of everyone else's doubt became heavier than their own conviction. I want to talk to you about what happens next if you do not fold, if you stay with your decision even when nobody claps. First, let me be clear about what self-trust actually is, because a lot of people confuse it with arrogance. Arrogance says, I am always right, and I do not need anyone's input. Self-trust says, I have examined this carefully. I understand the risks, and I believe This is the right move based on what I know right now. The first one shuts doors. The second one keeps them open while still walking forward. Self-trust does not mean you stop listening to people. It means you stop needing their permission before you listen to yourself. Here's why so many people struggle with this. Somewhere early in life, most of us learned that approval equals safety. When your parents smiled, you felt secure. When your teacher praised you, you felt capable. When your friends accepted you, you felt like you belonged. Those experiences wired your brain to seek external confirmation before trusting your own judgment. And for a child, that system makes perfect sense. But you are not a child anymore. And the decisions you face now, career changes, financial risks, relationship boundaries, personal reinventions, cannot be outsourced to a popularity vote. So how do you build genuine self-trust? You start small. And I mean genuinely small. Stop asking other people what you should have for lunch. Stop polling your group chat about whether you should buy the jacket. Stop waiting for someone to confirm that your schedule makes sense. Make the tiny decision. Observe the outcome. Learn from it. Repeat. Every small independent choice is a deposit into your self-trust account. It does not feel dramatic, but over time, the balance grows. Then increase the stakes gradually. Make a decision about how you spend your weekend without asking for input. Choose a book, a course, a project, without needing someone to validate the choice first. Set a personal goal and work toward it before announcing it to anyone. These are not reckless moves. They are practice rounds for the bigger decisions that are coming. Now, here is something that most self-help content skips over entirely. You need a decision journal, not a diary where you write about your feelings, although that has value too. A decision journal where you record the important choices you make and why you made them. Write the date. Write what you decided. Write the facts you considered. Write the risks you accepted. Write the outcome you expected. Then, weeks or months later, come back and review. This does one incredibly powerful thing. It separates the quality of your decision from the quality of the outcome. Because here is an uncomfortable truth. You can make an excellent decision and still get a bad result. And you can make a terrible decision and get lucky. If you only judge yourself by outcomes, you will never actually learn how to think better. But if you study your reasoning, you start to see patterns. You notice where your thinking is sharp and where it gets cloudy. You discover which assumptions tend to be accurate and which ones tend to mislead you. That is how real confidence is built. Not from positive affirmations in the mirror, from evidence that your brain can actually do this. Let me talk about something that comes up constantly when people try to trust themselves. Other people's reactions. Your mother says she is worried about you. Your best friend says they think you're making a mistake. Your partner says they do not understand why you cannot just be happy with what you have. These people are not your enemies. Most of them genuinely care about you. But caring about you does not automatically mean they understand your situation better than you do. Here's how to handle it. Listen to their concern. Genuinely listen. Then ask yourself one question. Are they identifying a real risk I have not considered, or are they projecting their own fear onto my decision? That distinction is everything. If your uncle says starting a business is risky because you have no savings, no plan, and no understanding of the market, that is useful information. Address it. If your uncle says starting a business is a bad idea because nobody in our family has ever done that, that is not information about your plan. That is information about his comfort zone. You can respect someone deeply and still choose differently than they would. Those two things are not in conflict. You do not need to argue with everyone who disagrees. Sometimes the most powerful response is a quiet, "I appreciate your concern, and I have thought about this carefully." Then keep moving. There is another piece of self-trust that people rarely discuss: keeping promises to yourself. Think about this honestly. How many times have you told yourself you would wake up early and then hit snooze? How many times have you promised yourself you would finish a project and then abandoned it halfway through? How many times have you set a boundary in your head and then folded the moment someone pushed back? Every broken self-promise teaches your brain that your own words do not mean anything. And if your words do not mean anything to you, how can you possibly trust your own judgment? The fix is not to make bigger, bolder promises. The fix is to make smaller promises you can actually keep. Tell yourself you will study for 20 minutes and then study for 20 minutes. Tell yourself you will save a specific amount this month and then save it. Tell yourself you will have one honest conversation this week and then have it. Each kept promise is proof that you are someone who follows through. And that proof accumulates into something that no amount of external validation can replace: self-respect. One more thing before we move on. Being misunderstood is temporary. Results take time. The gap between making a decision and seeing the outcome can be weeks, months, sometimes years. During that gap, people will question you. They will look at your incomplete progress and judge it as failure. They will see the messy middle of your journey and assume you are lost. Do not let their impatience become your doubt. Keep working. Keep building. Let your results speak when they are ready, not when other people's curiosity demands an answer. You do not need everyone to believe in you. You need to believe in yourself enough to keep going until the evidence arrives. And it will arrive, not because the universe guarantees success, but because a person who consistently makes thoughtful decisions, learns from mistakes, and refuses to quit has already changed the odds in their favor. Trust yourself, not blindly, not arrogantly, but deliberately, patiently, and with the kind of quiet confidence that comes from knowing you have done the work. And make this a weekly practice. At the end of each week, look back at the decisions you made. Which ones were driven by clear thinking? Which ones were driven by fear of disappointing someone? Where did you follow advice that genuinely improved your plan? Where did you abandon a good idea just because someone raised an eyebrow? You are not doing this to be perfect. You are doing it to become aware. Because awareness is the bridge between living reactively and living intentionally. There is one final thing I want to say about self-trust. You will be wrong sometimes. You will make a decision that does not work out. You will trust your gut, and your gut will be off. That does not mean the system is broken. It means you are human. The question is never whether you will make mistakes. The question is whether you can look at a mistake honestly, learn from it, adjust your course, and keep going without collapsing into self-doubt. A person who can do that is more trustworthy than a person who has never been tested. Your scars are not evidence of failure. They are evidence of experience, and experience is the raw material that self-trust is built from. Chapter 8. Move before your mind builds a prison. Let me describe a moment you have probably experienced 100 times. You decide to do something. It feels clear. It feels right. You are going to make the call, start the project, send the application, have the conversation. The decision is made. You feel a spark of energy, and then you do not do it. Not because something changed, not because new information arrived, not because someone talked you out of it, but because your mind quietly, cleverly, almost invisibly, built a wall between the decision and the action. It started with a small thought. Maybe I should wait until Monday. Then another. I should probably do more research first. Then another. What if I am not ready? Then another. What if it does not work? And before you knew it, the clearest decision you had made all week was buried under a pile of perfectly reasonable-sounding excuses. This is fear's most sophisticated trick. It does not always scream. Sometimes it whispers. And the whisper sounds so much like common sense that you do not even realize you are being talked out of your own life. Here is something I want you to carry with you after today. Action almost always needs to come before confidence, not after. Before. You will not feel ready before you start the business. You will feel ready after your first few months of figuring it out. You will not feel confident before the first conversation. You will feel confident after you survive it. You will not feel certain before you submit the application. You will feel certain after you see what happens. Confidence is not the entrance fee. It is the reward you collect after you show up anyway. So stop waiting for the feeling. Start creating the evidence. Here is a practical method that works for almost anyone. Do not define the goal. Define the first physical action. Your brain responds completely differently to start a successful business than it does to open a document and write 3 sentences describing what I want to sell. The first one is a mountain. The second one is a step. And the step is all you need right now. Want to get healthier? Do not commit to a complete lifestyle overhaul. Put your shoes on and walk for 10 minutes. Want to fix your finances? Do not try to build a perfect budget system tonight. Open your bank app and look at last month's spending. Want to have a difficult conversation? Do not script the entire thing in your head. Decide on the single most important sentence you need to say, and say that one sentence. The rest will follow. It always does. Because action generates momentum, and momentum generates clarity, and clarity generates more action. The hardest part is always the first 5 minutes. I want to introduce you to a trick that sounds almost too simple to work, but I promise it does. The 10-minute rule. When you feel resistance toward an important task, tell yourself you will work on it for exactly 10 minutes. That is it. Not an hour. Not until it is done. 10 minutes. Set a timer if you need to. And when the 10 minutes are up, you have full permission to stop. Here is what usually happens. You start. The first 2 minutes feel awful. Your brain is still protesting. By minute 4 or 5, something shifts. You are engaged. The task is not as terrible as your imagination made it. By minute 10, you often do not want to stop. The resistance has melted because it was never really about the task. It was about starting. And even if you do stop after 10 minutes, you have still done something. You have broken the spell. You are no longer someone who is avoiding. You are someone who worked on it for 10 minutes and can work on it again tomorrow. That identity shift matters more than the 10 minutes themselves. Now let me talk about something that keeps ambitious people paralyzed for months. The fear of imperfection. You want your first attempt to be impressive. You want people to see it and be amazed. You want the result to match the vision in your head. And because the gap between your current skill and your imagined result is so wide, you never start. You tell yourself you need more preparation, more research, more training, more time. But here is what every successful person knows that you might not have learned yet. The first version of everything is terrible. The first draft of the novel was embarrassing. The first version of the app was full of bugs. The first attempt at the business lost money. The first speech was shaky and too fast. And that is exactly how it is supposed to be. Because the first version does not exist to be perfect. It exists to teach you what needs to change. You cannot edit a blank page. You cannot improve a project that does not exist. You cannot get feedback on work you never shared. Give yourself permission to be bad at something for a little while. That permission is the doorway to becoming good at it. Write down what you're actually risking by taking this action. Not the exaggerated fear version, the real version. What do you lose if you apply and get rejected? An hour of your time and a temporary sting to your ego. What do you lose if you start the project and it does not work? Some effort and a pile of lessons. What do you lose if you have the conversation and it goes badly? Some discomfort and possibly some clarity about where the relationship actually stands. Now write down what you lose by doing nothing. Time, growth, opportunity, self-respect, the quiet satisfaction of knowing you tried. That second list is almost always longer. Inaction is not free. It just bills you later. Fear is loudest in the gap between deciding and doing. Once you cross that gap, once you take the first imperfect step, the volume drops. Not to zero, but enough. Enough to hear your own judgment again. Enough to feel your own capability returning. Enough to remember that you have started hard things before and survived. So here's your assignment. Today, right now if possible, choose one action you have been postponing. Not the biggest one on your list, just one that matters. Define the smallest possible starting point. Set a 10-minute timer. Begin. Do not negotiate with the resistance. Do not wait for inspiration. Do not open another browser tab to research it a little more. Just start. Your future self is not built by the plans you make. It is built by the steps you take. And every step taken while afraid is worth 10 steps taken in comfort. Because those are the steps that prove something to you that no book, no speech, no motivational video can prove. You can do hard things you already have, and you are about to do it again. One more thing. Fear does not disappear after you start. It often shows up again in the middle. You begin a project and things get real. The first criticism arrives. The first setback hits. The excitement fades, and what remains is the boring, unglamorous work of showing up day after day. That is where most people quit. Not at the beginning. In the middle. The middle is where discipline replaces motivation, where evidence replaces imagination, where the person you are becoming is forged through repetition, not inspiration. When fear shows up in the middle, do not treat it as a sign that you should stop. Treat it as a sign that you are doing something that matters. Easy things do not generate fear. Comfortable routines do not challenge your identity. If you are afraid, it means you are growing. And growth is never, ever comfortable. Create a simple starting ritual for yourself, something you do every time before important work. Put your phone in another room. Clear your desk. Open the document. Take one breath. Begin with the smallest defined task. make the ritual boring and repeatable. The point is not to feel inspired. The point is to make beginning automatic, so your brain stops treating every work session as a negotiation. The fewer decisions between you and the work, the less room fear has to build its wall. You do not need to feel brave to act bravely. You just need to start before your mind finishes building reasons not to. Part 5, Chapter 9, Survive the Storm Without Forgetting Who You Are. Some days will break your rhythm. I am not going to sugarcoat that. There will be mornings when your alarm goes off and the weight of everything you are carrying makes it hard to put your feet on the floor. A conversation went wrong. A plan collapsed. Someone you trusted let you down. Money got tight at the worst possible time. Your body is tired, your patience is thin, and every small inconvenience feels like the universe is personally targeting you. Those days are coming, not because you are doing something wrong, but because you are alive. And being alive means things will sometimes fall apart in ways you did not expect and cannot immediately fix. The question that matters is not how to avoid those days. You cannot. The question is how to move through them without becoming someone you do not recognize when they are over. Because here's what hard days do if you let them. They hijack your identity. On a normal day, you know who you are. You are patient. You are kind. You are someone who tries. But when pain shows up, when exhaustion sits on your chest, when disappointment wraps itself around your thinking, suddenly you become someone else. You snap at people who did nothing wrong. You abandon habits that usually keep you grounded. You make decisions based entirely on escaping the discomfort of this moment without thinking about what those decisions cost you tomorrow. And when the storm passes, you look around at the damage and think, that was not me, but it was you. It was the version of you that shows up when your usual systems break down. And the good news is, you can prepare for that version. You can build a structure that holds even when your emotions are falling apart. Start with this. On your best day, when you are clear-headed and calm, write down 5 non-negotiable actions. These are the things you will do no matter what kind of day you're having. They do not need to be impressive. In fact, the simpler, the better. Wake up at a reasonable hour. Eat something that actually nourishes your body. Complete your single most important responsibility. Move your body for at least 15 minutes. Go to sleep at a reasonable time. That is it. 5 anchors. On a great day, you will do far more than this. On a terrible day, this is your minimum. And here is why this matters. When everything feels chaotic, having a small set of non-negotiable actions gives your brain something predictable to hold on to. You may not be able to control the problem. You may not be able to fix the relationship today. You may not have the answers. But you can eat a proper meal. You can take a walk. You can finish one task. And those small completions remind your brain that you are still functioning. You are still here. You are still choosing. Now let me talk about something that hard days reveal, your weak points. And I do not mean that as criticism. I mean it as information. When pressure hits, you will default to certain patterns. Maybe you overspend when you are stressed. Maybe you isolate yourself when you are sad. Maybe you pick fights when you are anxious. Maybe you abandon your health when work gets intense. Maybe you scroll for hours because your brain is desperate for something that does not require effort. Do not judge yourself for these patterns. Study them, because once you know your defaults, you can build safeguards. If you overspend when stressed, leave your credit card at home on difficult days. If you isolate, text one person before the urge to disappear takes over. If you pick fights, give yourself a 2-hour cooling period before responding to anything that makes you angry. If you scroll endlessly, set a screen time limit the night before. These are not signs of weakness. They are signs that you understand yourself well enough to protect yourself from your worst impulses. That is actually one of the strongest things a person can do. Here is another thing hard days will try to do. They will try to convince you that one bad experience defines your entire life. You lose one opportunity and your brain whispers, "Nothing ever works out for me." You have one terrible conversation and suddenly, "Nobody will ever understand me." You make one financial mistake and now, "I will never be stable." Notice the words, never, always, nothing, everything. These words are emotional amplifiers. They take a single event and stretch it across your entire existence. And in the moment, they feel absolutely true. But they are not true. They are your pain talking in absolutes because pain does not do nuance. When you catch yourself using those words, slow down. Replace the absolute with the actual. "I lost this opportunity" becomes, "I lost this specific opportunity, and there will be others." "This conversation was painful" becomes, "This one conversation was painful, and I can try again when we are both calmer." "I made a financial mistake" becomes, "I made a mistake with this specific amount, and I can create a plan to recover." Specific language during hard times is not just a communication trick. It is a survival tool. It keeps your identity from collapsing under the weight of a single bad day. I also want to talk about rest, because our culture has a terrible relationship with it. We treat rest like laziness. We treat slowing down like giving up. We celebrate the person who works 18-hour days and never takes a break, as if burning out is some kind of achievement. But here is what nobody puts on a motivational poster. You cannot think clearly when you are exhausted. You cannot make good decisions when your brain has not slept properly in 4 days. You cannot be patient with the people you love when your nervous system is running on empty. Rest is not the opposite of responsibility. Rest is what makes responsibility sustainable. On your hardest days, sometimes the most productive thing you can do is stop. Eat something warm, take a shower, lie down, let your brain stop solving for one evening. Tomorrow will still be there. The problem will still be there. But you will meet it with a mind that actually works, instead of a mind that has been grinding gears with no fuel since Tuesday. Create a small evening recovery routine for difficult days. Write down the 3 things weighing on you most. Next to each one, write the single next action. Then close the notebook. Put away your phone. Do something that asks nothing of you. Listen to music. Sit outside for 10 minutes. Watch something light. Let the day end without squeezing one more hour of productivity out of a brain that has already given everything it had. And please, stop measuring your worth by how productive you are on your worst days. Some days are for building, other days are for surviving. Both of them count. A day where you did nothing extraordinary but stayed respectful, kept your promises, took care of your body, and did not make the situation worse is not a wasted day. It is a day you held the line. And holding the line during a storm is harder than sprinting on a sunny afternoon. One more thing about hard days. Do not go through them completely alone. I know the instinct. When things get bad, you want to disappear. You do not want to burden anyone. You do not want to seem weak. You do not want to explain what is going on because explaining it means feeling it again. But isolation during pain is one of the most dangerous patterns a person can develop. Not because you need someone to fix your problem, but because pain has a way of distorting your thinking when it has no audience. It whispers lies that sound like truth in the silence of an empty room. You do not need to tell everyone. You need to tell one person. Choose carefully. Not the person who will panic, not the person who will judge, the person who can sit with you in the mess without trying to clean it up in 5 minutes. Tell them what happened. Tell them what you need. Maybe you need advice. Maybe you need company. Maybe you just need someone to say, "That sounds really hard, and I am here." Be specific about what helps, because people who care about you want to help, but they cannot always guess how. And if someone responds poorly, if they minimize your pain or make it about themselves, that does not mean you were wrong to reach out. It means you reached the wrong person this time. Try again with someone else. Vulnerability is a skill, and like any skill, sometimes you practice it in the wrong room before you find the right one. Your hard days do not define you. Your patterns during hard days reveal what needs attention, and your response during hard days builds the kind of character that no amount of easy living can create. So, when the next difficult morning arrives, and it will, remember your 5 anchors. Protect your language. Rest without guilt. And remind yourself that this day is one chapter, not the whole story. Chapter 10. Stop waiting for permission to live your life. Here is the last thing I want to talk to you about, and it might be the most important thing in this entire book. You are waiting. You may not even realize it, but you are waiting. Waiting for your parents to approve. Waiting for your partner to understand. Waiting for your boss to recognize you. Waiting for your friends to stop questioning your choices. Waiting until you feel ready. Waiting until the timing is perfect. Waiting till everyone around you agrees that it is okay for you to become the person you have been thinking about becoming. And while you wait, your life is happening right now. Without your full participation, I am not saying this to make you feel guilty. I am saying this because I think you deserve to hear something that very few people will tell you directly. You do not need anyone's permission to change your life. You do not need a unanimous vote from your family before you switch careers. You do not need your friends to understand before you set a new boundary. You do not need the world to feel safe before you take a risk. You need to make a responsible decision and then own it. That is it. That is the whole secret. Now let me be careful here, because living without permission does not mean living without responsibility. Those are completely different things. A person who quits their job in a fit of frustration without savings, without a plan, without understanding the consequences, is not being independent. They are being impulsive. Independence means you examine the situation, weigh the risks, consider the people affected, prepare as much as reasonably possible, and then choose. You do not skip the thinking. You skip the part where you hand the final decision to someone who does not have to live with the result. Ask yourself something right now. What decision have you been postponing because you are waiting for someone to say, "It is okay"? Write it down. Be specific. Now write whose approval you have been waiting for. Look at that name and ask yourself honestly, does this person have to live with the consequences of this decision? Do they wake up in your body? Do they go to your job? Do they carry your regrets? Do they lie in your bed at night wondering what could have been? If the answer is no, then their opinion is input, not authority. Listen to it. Consider it. But do not give it veto power over your life. There is a cost to living by everyone else's blueprint that nobody talks about. You lose yourself. Slowly, silently, one compromised decision at a time, you take the career your father wanted. You stay in the city your partner prefers. You maintain friendships that drain you because leaving them would cause drama. You keep your real opinions hidden because sharing them would make holidays uncomfortable. And 10 years later, you wake up in a life that fits everyone except you. That is not kindness. That is not selflessness. That is self-abandonment dressed up as keeping the peace. And the peace you are keeping is everyone else's at the expense of your own. So how do you start? Not with a revolution, with a reclamation. Start taking back small pieces of your life. Decide how you spend your Saturday without asking anyone's opinion. Choose a personal project and begin it before announcing it. Say no to one obligation that you have been accepting out of guilt rather than genuine desire. Spend one evening doing exactly what you want instead of what everyone expects. These small acts of independence are not selfish. They are necessary, because a person who never practices choosing for themselves will freeze when the big decision finally arrives. And the big decision is always coming. Career change, relationship boundary, financial risk, geographic move, personal reinvention. You want to be someone who has practiced choosing by the time that moment arrives. You should also get comfortable with people not understanding you for a while. When you start changing, the people around you will react to the change before they understand it. Your mother might worry. Your friend might feel threatened. Your colleague might question your judgment. Their reactions are not evidence that you are wrong. They are evidence that you are different from what they expected. And that difference will either be understood eventually or it will not. Either way, you cannot put your life on pause until every single person in your orbit feels comfortable with your growth. Here is a question worth sitting with. What is the cost of doing nothing? We always calculate the risk of action. What if I fail? What if I am embarrassed? What if I lose money? But we rarely calculate the risk of inaction with the same honesty. What if you stay in this job for another 5 years and the regret only grows? What if you never have the conversation and the relationship slowly dies from silence? What if you keep waiting for the perfect moment and it never arrives? Inaction is not neutral. It is a choice with consequences. And those consequences compound quietly until one day you realize that the life you were going to start living somehow already passed you by. Let me leave you with this. Your life is not a rough draft that someone else gets to edit. It is not a proposal that requires board approval. It is not a performance that needs applause before it counts. Your life is yours. Messy, imperfect, uncertain, and completely yours. You will make mistakes. Good. That means you are choosing. You will face criticism. Good. That means you are visible. You will feel uncertain. Good. That means you are growing into something that does not fit the old mold anymore. Stop asking for permission. Start taking responsibility. Listen to people who have earned your trust, but keep the final decision in your own hands. Build a life that makes sense to you, even if it confuses everyone else. And when fear tells you to wait, to shrink, to stay quiet, to play it safe, remind yourself of one thing. You were not put here to live someone else's version of your life. You were put here to figure out your own. And the only way to figure it out is to start living it today. Not when you feel ready, not when everyone agrees, not when the fear goes away. Today. Closing. You have reached the end of this audiobook, but if I have done my job, something inside you has already started shifting. Not because my words were magic, but because somewhere in these chapters you recognized yourself. You saw your own hesitation. You felt your own patterns. You remembered your own missed moments. And you realized that fear has been charging rent in your mind for far too long without earning its place. Let me remind you of what we covered. Fear is not your enemy, but it cannot be your decision maker. People may intimidate you, but only if you hand them that power. Honest communication is uncomfortable, but silence is more expensive. Problems grow in the dark, so bring them into the light. Worry is not caring. It is just suffering without a purpose. You can stand your ground without losing your kindness. Self-trust is built through small kept promises, not grand declarations. Action comes before confidence, not after. Hard days test your character, they do not define it. And your life does not require anyone's signature but your own. The next time fear whispers that you should, stay quiet, speak anyway. When a problem tells you to look away, face it directly. When worry drags you into tomorrow, bring yourself back to today. When someone challenges you, stay steady. When life gets heavy, protect your character and keep walking. You do not need to become fearless. You just need to become someone who moves forward while fear is still talking. And every time you do that, every single time, you prove something to yourself that nothing else can prove. You are braver than you believed. You are stronger than you felt. And you are far, far more capable than fear ever wanted you to know. Come back to this audiobook whenever you need a reset, whenever discipline feels distant, whenever doubt gets loud. These words will be here. But the real work, the work that actually changes your life, that happens in the ordinary moments when you choose courage over comfort. Keep choosing, keep moving, keep building the life that belongs to you.